It is the last gasp of campaign 2016, and this is the World Meets America report. I'm William Kern, the founder of worldmeets.us, and I'm the host of this program. What I want to do today, before we speak about Election Day tomorrow, with three commentators from outside the United States and one of the internet's leading conspiracy theorists, is to issue some cautionary remarks to my fellow Americans before you go to the polls. Regardless of whether you're voting for Trump or Clinton, please keep in mind all the ways that outside actors are trying to manipulate you, and I am not only referring to the fact that someone has provided WikiLeaks with hacked data that undercuts only one of the two major candidates. So is there any truth to the claim that the election is quote-unquote rigged? Let me list the ways. Number one, major media is corrupt because of the profit motive. The conglomerates who own our major news networks do not care about informing the public. That isn't their business. Despite the claims of CNN, Fox, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, and CBS, whose news anchors repeatedly prattle on about being fair and balanced and being the greatest news gathering organization in history, etc., etc., etc. Number two, almost the entire existing ruling class have favored and continue to favor unbridled globalization that favors the automation, artificial intelligence, and cheap labor demanded by multinationals at the expense of the general population. That's clear from the hacked DNC and John Podesta emails, and it would be equally clear if we had the hacked emails from inside the Republican Party. That's precisely why Donald Trump still has a chance of winning, despite the fact that the man has shot himself in the foot by uttering some of the most absurd and for many alarming statements every day since last summer. Number three, our political system is, to continue using a much abused phrase, thoroughly rigged. Why do I say that? I'm not a conspiracy theorist. A handful of industries and special interests centered on the national security state and the mass surveillance state have an army of lobbyists and a bottomless pit of money that gets them the legislation and the state contracts they demand at the expense of the people, who have comparatively feeble representation. And that's why many of us argue that the republic is already dead and that we now live in a plutocracy. So people who claim Trump supporters are deluded for saying the system is rigged are either deluded themselves or simply want to discredit their opponent without respect to the facts. If the winner of this election ignores the inchoate and justified anger of the left and right in this country, they'll be digging their political grave. If Hillary manages to win, and it looks like she will, she'll have precious little time to prove she really has changed her perceptions of the way globalization is being pursued by decision makers. If Trump manages a miracle win, instead of doing something about automation and artificial intelligence, and it just builds a big fat wall along the Mexican border, he is going to lose spectacularly in 2020. Because whether his supporters like it or not, automation has already replaced far more workers than immigrants have, and that dynamic is only going to get worse. It's estimated, for example, that 35% of all U.S. jobs, blue collar and white, will be automated by 2020. And keep in mind, as driverless cars come online, 40% of American men make their living driving. Can you imagine the anger of the electorate under those circumstances? Now talk about pitchforks and torches. Now, before we get to our guests, I have a couple of pleas for the people of this land, the United States of America. First of all, get over the issue of skin color already. Just get over it. Treat everyone as fairly as you can. Start with a clean slate. Why, at this stage of the game, are we still talking about race? Who gives a flying you-know-what about skin color? Can you read? Can you function with others? Can you finish the job? That's all that matters. I was brought up to believe we're pragmatic people. Well, where's the pragmatism on race? Do you remember deciding what skin color you were going to have? No. We're born as we're born. And we should be judged, as Martin Luther King said, by the content of our character and not a damn thing else. You know, can we agree on that? If we could just manage that for a generation or two, the whole issue would be and should be in the rearview mirror. You know, for those of you who still favor something called racial purity, You're doing the equivalent of howling at the freaking moon. You are standing in opposition to reason and history, and if you don't budge, it's going to end in bloodshed, and you're going to lose, because it's just it's about numbers and it's about reason. My second plea to you today: yes, political correctness has gotten to the point of absurdity. But that doesn't mean you can't be polite while saying what needs to be said. Just because you oppose political correctness doesn't mean you have to be nasty. Civility, civilization are fragile and shockingly superficial. And we need to keep them, or we cannot function. We can't function at all. Along those lines, we need to stop demonizing the loyal opposition. Unless we operate under the assumption that our opponents are acting in good faith, we will lose this country. These are revolutionary times. It calls for statesmanship. For the Clinton folks, that means not considering Trump supporters deplorable just because they're angry at our discredited political order. And for Trump supporters, that means not criminalizing political behavior that's been going on since ancient Greece. Does Hillary Clinton have one face for the public and one in private? Of course she does. And so does every one of us. What would happen, for example, if we told everyone we met precisely what we thought about everything? Would you tell your grocer the same things you would tell your doctor? Would you show your Uncle Joe or Auntie Sue the same side of you would your boyfriend or girlfriend? Of course not. But I hasten to add, if you tell a room full of bankers you favor a free trade pact, but tell the public you don't, that is a contradiction too far. And it is legitimately the subject of criticism. And we have to add the following. So as I said on the first edition of this program last year, we are living in an ocean of false and misleading information in the form of constant and overweening advertising and propaganda designed to part us from our money, our self-control, and our self-respect. We're constantly bombarded and insulted by an endless stream of falsehoods scientifically calculated to get us to react emotionally and viscerally. Check out the new book, The Attention Merchants, by Tim Wu. We have to shield ourselves from this and discourage it from continuing. We have to guard the gates to our consciousness, and by that I mean block every online ad possible, mute or fast forward through every TV commercial possible, and if for some reason we have to expose ourselves to this, these shenanigans, we shouldn't do it passively, because getting this absurd data into our heads is the goal of a massive, well-thought-out process designed to get us to do things we wouldn't ordinarily do, whether it has to do with eating, fearing a terrorist attack when we have a better chance of being struck by lightning 3 times in one day, consuming pharmaceuticals, or ogling a girl while drinking a Budweiser. Which brings me to the mainstream media, of which I came. My last position before I started worldmeets.us and this program was with the New York Times in Paris, at the International Herald Tribune, which is now called the International New York Times. Never in my life has the news media been held in lower regard, and justifiably so. So why don't people have any faith in it? I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to explain what Chuck Todd, Rachel Maddow, and Bill O'Reilly puzzle about, apparently, but never manage to explain. The profit motive and the goals of the multinationals that own our major networks are diametrically opposed to the mission of informing the public. The major media, owned as it is by conglomerates who care nothing about informing the people, and a whole lot about selling us drugs and warfare, is a corrupted way of providing news and information to the electorate. Period. Of course, these words will never be uttered by Hannity or Wolf Blitzer, because to say those words, to say the truth in corporate media, is a firing offense. So why do some of our guests on today's program, particularly Trump supporters, believe that everything's rigged? Because in many, if not every case they point to, it demonstrably is. Is the mainstream media rigged? As I've just explained, it is rigged. It's rigged to line the pockets of a handful of special interests that get their way almost without exception and without fanfare. This isn't a conspiracy. I've often wondered, and perhaps you have too, if it matters who's elected president. Because the minute a new president gets to the Oval Office, he or she is largely captured by the national security state and the massive enterprises that build its weapons, its tools of mass surveillance, and implements for servicing troops in the field. I had to laugh the other day because people who support Donald Trump are saying that Hillary Clinton is taking money from the Saudis. And the Saudis abuse women and so on and so forth. And they fund terrorists with the same money they're funding the Clinton Foundation. We fund the terrorists. The United States funds the terrorists and helps arm the terrorists. Do you realize we sold Saudi Arabia over the last few years $700 billion of military equipment and training? The United States. This is not a deal between, the Clinton Foundation and the Saudi Arabians. I'm talking about the United States of America and its foreign policy. And, maybe that would be a better point for the Trump people to make. I don't know. But, the Clinton Foundation will take their money and probably they would reason some good with the money that they get from the Saudis, whatever else the Saudis might do. In any event, Trump supporters are not only angry at Clinton, they're angry at Trump. Clinton supporters not only angry at Trump, they're angry at Clinton. There's an inchoate anger across the electorate because globalization has run amok to the point that anyone who believes in global institutions or a global polity is considered criminal. Pay careful attention to two of my guests today. Mike Filip, host of American Nook, and alternative media firebrand David Weiss. So we're living in a revolutionary time. And for the first time in my 54-year-old life, there's more than a chance that the peaceful transition of power is in doubt. I say that only because one of the candidates has said so. Will there be vote rigging? Much of the country thinks there will be. Is George Soros behind it? Much of the country thinks he is. Is Hillary Clinton an unindicted criminal seeking to sell America out to a global elite answerable to no one? Much of the country thinks so. Is Donald Trump an unindicted sex offender? Many people think he is, and not only Democrats, and especially women. Is Donald Trump Putin's useful idiot? Is WikiLeaks leaking Democratic Party emails at the behest of the Russians or someone else to manipulate the American polls? The answer seems to be yes, even to those who love the impact of the leaks. Should Donald Trump threaten to jail his opponent during the campaign? His supporters seem fine with that, while much of the population sees behavior like that an attack on democracy itself. It's been a long and disturbing campaign for so many reasons that it's hard to list them all. So, my guests today are from Italy, Switzerland, Canada, and the United States, and they range across the political spectrum. Depending upon your point of view, one or two of them are going to shock or piss you off. I tried to let my guests today speak their piece without much challenge because I wanted them to demonstrate the incredible divergence of views and the unalloyed anger arising from the electorate. First, we have Gianna Riotta. Mr. Riotta is one of Europe's leading columnists who writes in English and Italian and spends a good deal of his time in New York. Next, we have the aforementioned Mike Filip, a dual U.S.-Canadian citizen and host of the program American Nook. Then we have Patrik Etschmeyer, a Swiss columnist who writes regularly about the United States. Dan Collins, a renowned financial analyst who lives in Shanghai, specializes in China financials, and who spoke to us about the China-Russia angles. And David Weiss, who's made a mark in alternative media and specializes in conspiracy, or, as he would argue, reality. So let's get started. Here is my 30-minute interview with Italy's Gianna Riotta. Last December, when we last spoke to my next guest, Gianna Riotta, he wrote the following words in the Italian newspaper La Stampa. Quote, Trump, with the vulgarity of a nouveau riche, a mop of red hair like a Philistine, 35, 25, 35 platinum blondes, chromium-plated palaces, neon-lit casinos, and racist rhetoric, disgust the establishment left and right, but attracts those left behind by globalization, who eat eggs and grits for breakfast, or in the South, maize porridge, rather than cappuccino and croissants. People who dream of a brand new pickup truck and not a fashionable iPhone. By bringing this forgotten social class into play again, Trump has already won. This is December of last year. For those of you not yet impressed, Mr. Riotta has contributed to the Washington Post, Le Monde, Foreign Policy Magazine, the New York Times, and many other publications, and teaches at some of the world's leading universities, including Princeton and Columbia, and his latest work can be found at riotta.it. Mr. Riotta, it is a great honor to have you back.
Same here. Thanks for inviting me.
Mr. Riotta, you're in New York right now.
Yes.
Am I correct? Have you ever seen anything like this U.S. election? I mean, how would you describe the mood?
I haven't, and nobody has, because you read my article, and I thank you for that. But the point is that the wave of populism that has been sweeping America since last year, is sweeping Europe as well. This is not something that is unique in the United States. The order, the international and domestic order of the Cold War is over, and the voters are looking for a new balance. They haven't found it yet. We had Brexit in England. The Great Britain left the European Union. We have Madame Le Pen, a radical rightist whose father was a neo-fascist, that's set to win the presidential elections next year in France, and you have the maverick populist Five Stars in Italy, already ruling Turin and Rome, even the capital Rome, and again ready set to win the election in Italy in 2018. In this country, this movement took the flag of Donald Trump, and don't believe that this is going to be over with the Tuesday election, because even if Trump loses against Hillary Clinton, the movement will continue.
You know, Mr. Riotta, I'd love to get into what's going to happen after this, but can you do me a favor and try, if you can, to put Donald Trump in the context of all the other populists that you were just talking about in Europe or anywhere else, that the populism that's sweeping the world, where does Trump fit into that universe of personalities, in your opinion?
Very good question. First of all, Trump is not a fascist. I wrote an article on the magazine The Atlantic last spring, trying to explain to people, both leftist and sometimes close to Senator Sanders, and rightist, all the neoconservative intellectuals like Max Boot or Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard that used to work for President G.W. Bush, that Trump is not a fascist. America only knows the propaganda image of fascism, like it was spread in this country during World War II. But fascism was a deadly political machine. A fascist would occupy power with a strong military force, with a party militia, and then start epurating dissidents, arresting people, and canceling democracy and civil rights. Nobody, I guess, envisioned Trump doing this. Trump has no viable militia. Trump is not a fascist. But him not being a fascist doesn't make him less dangerous of a politician. Trump is a demagogue. He's a populist, like Senator McCarthy during the witch hunt age, like Father Coughlin, the Catholic priest that in the 30s spread anti-Semitic and xenophobic propaganda from his radio talk show, like America Firsters, like Lindbergh, like Joseph Kennedy father, the father of President Kennedy, that was an isolationist and very friendly with Nazis. So he's not a fascist, but he's a very dangerous populist. So
because he's not a fascist doesn't mean he doesn't worry you, in other words. That's what you're saying.
The past never worries me, because the past is past. And we always keep fighting the wars, ideological wars of real wars of the past, and we never brace ourselves for the wars of the future. And what really is you see, when people, I've seen this in Italy for over 20 years, with people branding Berlusconi as a fascist, and this only means that you give the youth a false target. So people in the younger generation will say, well, if Trump is a fascist, I am entitled to attack him. I am entitled to protest with violence because we have to resist fascism. And at the same time, you disarm them against the real danger. Think about this, and this is where I find the intellectuals that are branding Trump as a fascist really irresponsible. If I'm wrong,
well, I mean, look, but there's a lot of hyperbole in this election.
Too much.
And I think if you if you would ask people on the left or people who support Hillary, I don't even know right, left, it may not even be appropriate anymore. But if you ask people who support Hillary Clinton, they will say most of the hyperbole is coming from the other side.
I think,
I just want to point out that it's true that perhaps if you say that Donald Trump is a fascist, it's some hyperbole because people don't really understand what the word means, as you've been pointing out. It's a complicated concept. So whose hyperbole is more harmful here? Do you think?
I think they are all guilty on that count. All guilty. Let's start with Senator Sanders during the primaries. I mean, he indicted globalization like the most, dangerous economy in the history of the world, while it actually was the movement that took billions of people out of misery in Latin America, in Asia, even in Africa right now. Here, it's automation that has destroyed jobs more than globalization.
Well, that's, it's interesting how that is not an issue because it seems to me that automation should be the issue that people are talking about much more than almost any of these other things.
My son, that is a 27-year-old student at graduate school at Columbia, was pointing with a few friends the other day the issues that the three debates didn't discuss. Climate change, automation, education, and the place of education in the poorest strata of American society. The problem is the real disappointing issue with these elections that we'll be discussing issues that have very little impact on our future, and we haven't been discussed the issues that will actually make it or break it, our future. We have said of Trump, but even Hillary, of course, is guilty of hype because she changed her position dramatically for being a pro-trade and free market politician to being a protectionist and a more of an economic isolationist candidate once she felt that the wind was changing.
Right.
And I have to say that sometimes her tones were very shrill, and that this didn't help her at all.
Well, let me ask you this. Last time you were here, I asked you whether you could compare Julius Caesar, a man of the upper classes who turned populist and upended the established order, to Donald Trump, and you weren't too keen on that comparison. Is there an episode in ancient Roman history you might compare the current situation to, or some personalities you might compare Trump to?
First of all, my friend, I wasn't very keen because, after all, I have a lot of respect for Julius Caesar because he wrote is the Bello Gallico and is the Bello Civile, his diaries of the wars that are classics of world literature, and he reformed Rome, and he would have brought peace to Rome if he wasn't for that bunch of few people that didn't like him, and again, demagogues. And Trump doesn't appeal to me as having the same literary skills. I think that Trump is Trimalchio. Trimalchio is the hero of the novel, the Latin novel by Petronius Arbiter, that is a Vulgarian host that is a nouveau riche, exactly like Trump, and he spends money to buy favor of the intellectuals, of the politicians, and day in, day out, they pass time like it would be in Las Vegas, in a Roman Las Vegas, with very little values and a lot of luxury or fake luxury around them. It's interesting to remember that Fitzgerald, the first title that he came up with for the Great Gatsby was Trimalchio Dinner. And so I would say that Trump is Trimalchio in the sense that Fitzgerald saw a vulgarian that thinks that money buys everything.
Well, I thank you for that. It gives me something to look up and look into. Last year we spoke a good deal about mass surveillance. Today we have one side of an American election targeted by a massive hack published by WikiLeaks. Do you believe someone is intentionally manipulating the U.S. presidential election, Mr. Riotta?
This is a very murky area, and we have to be very cautious when we step into it. But, I never believed in the first WikiLeaks wave when Julian Assange unleashed the first WikiLeaks campaign.
You mean like 2006,
exactly.
7, 8, back then?
And I never believed when Snowden, as a single former NSA contractor, came out with millions of files out.
When you say you didn't believe that WikiLeaks came out with it, but what do you mean by that? You mean that you don't think that they were supplied with this material by somebody else?
What I mean is that very likely Assange is not a good faith person, and very likely Snowden is a good faith person. But I never believed that they acted alone. And if you talk to anybody that has any kind of knowledge on how intelligence works, they were all the time very suspicious about it.
Well, but isn't that the issue, though? Because we don't think that they act. I don't think Assange is acting alone, and he doesn't claim to be acting alone.
At the beginning,
he says, we got the material, and we're not going to tell you who gave it to us.
Yeah.
That's basically what he says.
Yeah, but at the beginning, now they've changed the tune a little bit, because at the beginning, their story was that there was always the Chelsea money, the heroic loan, Snowden.
By the way, she just tried to commit suicide for the second time.
Oh, really?
Last week.
I think that they should take really good care of her, because I think that clearly she's a frail, exploited person.
Well, they keep throwing her in solitary confinement. And she's trying to kill herself when they do so, and they keep doing it anyway.
Yeah, even if I think that she did something that is deeply wrong, I think that clearly she's a frail a human being, and I hope for her that she is given medical care and attention, and I don't think that she should be treated like this because she did tremendous damage, but she deserves to live and be treated fairly. Clearly, she doesn't have that kind of strength.
Mr. Reddy, you don't have any sympathy for people who think that it was a good thing to have what appeared to be war crimes exposed. I think she supplied those videos from Iraq where I think a number of journalists were killed by a helicopter attack and all that.
I do. And I think that clearly the mails that we are reading these days with Podesta, or, for example, I'm deeply embarrassed when I see Donna Brazil, that is a commentator paid by network that does, that's a mortal sin for a
she supplied the debate questions to the Hillary campaign. That's what you mean.
That's a mortal sin, for a journalist. I remember.
But here's the thing, Mr. Should we put any stock in? I'm sure that happened. This thing with Brazil. But the point is, should we put stock in these documents? Because first of all, text is very easy to fake. We don't know anything about where these things came from, except it seems likely that, yes, it seems obvious that Podesta's emails were hacked since 1992. All of his emails were hacked. But who knows, right?
Okay. This is exactly the point. Let's go one step at a time. What Brazil did is really bad. and she should apologize, and she didn't deny it. At the same time, as I was telling you, I never believed that these kind of leaks are done by good faith people alone. And clearly, it's very easy to manipulate what you get. First of all,
So your answer is yes, though. You think someone's manipulating the U.S. presidential election.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. But I had to say, I'm on the record about this before this happened, because, again, you don't have this kind of hacking campaign done by single hackers or small organizations. You don't crack the vote of the Democratic Party. The vote of the Democratic Party is the first international data organization in the world, okay? It has been instrumental in almost electing John Kerry in 2004 and in electing Obama in 2008 and 2012.
When you say their vault, you mean their database?
The database.
Their
it's
database.
called the Vault.
Right.
Yeah, the nickname is the Vault in the lingo of the party. And the problem is that you don't crack that with an hacker that you pop up of college, okay? And also, Mr. Putin, the Russian president, never actually denied that he was behind the campaign. He was always very tongue-in-cheek. You know, he was always very playing on innuendos and going like, well, maybe, who knows? Oh, for sure we don't do this, because he knows that he's doing it. And the way is propaganda, if you follow the official networks of the Russian propaganda, RT and Sputnik, you'll see the way they act. And we know that there is something called National Security Agency in St. Petrograd, the former Leningrad. We even know the address, 55 Savushkina Street. And at 55 Savushkina Street, Putin has what he calls the troll factory. And the troll factory is thousands and thousands of people paid by the Russian intelligence, the GRU, the military intelligence, and the FSB, the domestic intelligence, working on spreading false news in America, in Europe, all over the world.
Well, so in other words, you do buy into the notion that it's probably Vladimir Putin, then?
It is.
Because the thing is that I've always thought, and I've always been told, especially by people who know about these things, that if it was Russia, there would be no way to tell it's Russia. Because they know what they're doing, and they don't leave fingerprints.
No. It's much more complicated than that, and it's very, very interesting. Esquire, the magazine Esquire, had a very interesting story by one of the best experts about computer security in this country, Professor Thomas Reed, that's RID. And Professor Reed writes that after the great hacking of the Democratic Party, what happened was that there was a crowd source of the American intelligence, security and computer intelligence people, and they start working together and together and together. It's much more complicated than that, because when you hack on that scale, you leave a lot of traces behind. I mean, during the Cold War, the American U-2 program was great for a while until the Soviet shot
down
one with the pilot Gary Powell. And that's what happened, that we found pieces of software that are Russian. We found chains. Sometimes they didn't block the chatbot. And so working on the chatbot, we found out that the messages were in Russian. I mean, there is a lot of evidence that the process started in Russia.
You know, I always have a hard time believing the intelligence services, because, as they remind us all the time, they're paid to break the law and lie. But you know, I understand what you're saying.
But this is the paradox. You know, it's very interesting, and we can discuss about it after the election. This is the paradox of having an intelligence organization in a democracy, because a democracy is paramount to be transparent. And if you work in intelligence, your duty is to be non-transparent. And so there is a contradiction there.
Indeed. Mr. Riotta, I have to cut this conversation short, but I want to, I could talk to you for so long. I mean, talking to you for 10 or 15 minutes is almost impossible.
Same here.
Wait, are you on edge about this? Are you personally on edge about this election, or are you more philosophical? What do you think?
That's an excellent question. I haven't thought about it. I'm on edge because as a citizen and as a voter in this country, of course, I have a personal interest in the outcome of the election. At the same time, 40 years, I had to sadly record this, 40 years of journalism have taught me that to be cool is the best way to understand what's going on. I'm really grateful and humble that you read what I wrote about Trump that was right last December. But if I managed to do that, it's simply because I didn't put much passion in it. Why are the neocon and why is the radical left missing who Trump really is? Simply because they put so much passion, and very often passion, instead of leading to understanding, leads to propaganda.
Mr. Riotta, one more question. What do you think is going to happen tomorrow?
I think Hillary Clinton is going to win. And I think that maybe the Democratic Party can squeak in to have a 50-50 control of the Senate. The legendary baseball coach Yogi Berra famously said, never make predictions, especially about the future. I'm breaking his wisdom because that's what the number give me. That's what the numbers give me. At the same time, would I be surprised if the numbers are wrong and Bill Clinton wins the elections? Donald Trump wins the election? Not at all. Not at all. The greatest mistake that Madame Clinton can make if she's indeed elected is to think that the political wave and the cultural wave that took Trump to almost winning the election and in winning the Republican nomination is going to be over with him. This is not over. It's the start of a new political movement in the country, and the Democrats and the Republicans should be aware of it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Riotta. Well, after the election, we'll check back with you and try and make some sense of the aftermath. I really would appreciate doing that.
And I'm ready to eat crow, of course. I'm ready to eat crow.
Okay, Mr. Riotta, you have a good day, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, sir. Thank you. My next guest on our World Meets America pre-election day program occupies some interesting ground in the alternative media universe. Mike Filip is a dual American-Canadian citizen and host of the AmericanuckRadio.com program. He comments regularly on issues that touch on both countries, and lately he has had quite a lot to say about the 2016 race. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. You said something to me about the Canadian media yesterday that I find interesting because, I think a lot of us think that the Canadian media is our media, but there are exclusively Canadian media. Could you talk a little bit about that, the Canadian media bias, in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely.
Against Donald Trump.
Yeah, okay, so what you have to understand about Canadian media is that Canada is a British colony country. So you've got the BBC in the UK, you've got ABC in Australia, and in Canada, you've got the CBC, and then we've got an organization that is called the CRTC. That's kind of like your FCC down in the States. And media is heavily kept, gate kept.
And now for something completely different.
influenced,
My
and
next
if you
guest
make
on
one
the
wrong
World
step,
Meets
you
America
lose your
report
license. So
pre-election day program
they heavily control the
occupies
news and
some interesting
information
ground
that
in the
flows in and
alternative
out of
media
Canada.
universe. Mike
And
Phillip is a dual
they've actually
American-Canadian
talked about
citizen
blocking a lot
and
of
host
U.S.
of
media
the
from coming
America
into Canada.
Canuck
But I don't think
radio
it'll matter
program
personally
at
because it
America
sounds to me like an echo chamber of
Nook
MSNBC,
He comments regularly
CNN, any
on
of
issues
these
that touch on both
American
countries.
so-called media
And
outlets
lately,
that are
he's
completely
had
in the
quite a
bag
lot
for the
to say
Democrat
about
Party.
the 2016
But
race.
when you say that they talk about blocking out American media, which ones? Like, what kind of information do they want to keep out?
Well, let me put it this way. I'll give you two examples, okay? Number one, Netflix. If you are a Netflix subscriber in Canada, you are blocked from having, as an example, that 70s show. Okay? That's one example.
Why?
Well, you got to ask yourself, right? And they, we've got what's called the Office of Culture Creation, and Canadians have a weird little brother mentality when it comes to the United States that the U.S. is so big that it's going to destroy our culture, so we have to make sure that we cultivate our own culture. And so, they mandate that you play Canadian content 30% on the hour. And not only that, but what's happening now, and this is the second example that I'll give you, when I go to listen to certain FM radio stations online out of the U.S., it will come up that this content is blocked in your country. ComedyCentral.com is blocked in Canada. So, I mean, people post stuff all over the place. But, I used to listen to an FM rock station out of Colorado that I really liked. I can't do that anymore. So internet censorship is under full swing here.
Okay, so basically they want to keep some portion of media consumption in Canadian hands or something like that.
Well, I don't know about Canadian hands, but government hands, yeah.
All right. So tell me what you think. What do you think is happening right now? Because, we're talking about two universes. If I speak to somebody who's a staunch Hillary Clinton supporter, it's a completely different worldview. Just, what do you think is going on here, and what kind of wrongdoing do you think is going on right now?
Well, I think there's massive wrongdoing going on at the highest levels of government in the United States, and those tentacles affect the rest of the world, especially us here in Canada. Now, we've been really lucky living next door to the United States. I mean, we could have had North Korea as a neighbor, right? But, I mean, we've been very prosperous and thrived through trade with the U.S. But the thing is that what your dollar, the performance of the U.S. dollar directly affects ours. And right now it's only at about 70 cents on a U.S. dollar, right? So it's great if you're working for a U.S. company from here and getting paid in U.S. funds. It's really bad if you're an importer. Exports are great, imports are bad, but our government is continually shutting down projects. They destroyed, if you go back to NAFTA and GATT, it was a bad deal for both countries. You remember Ross Perot and the giant second pound. So manufacturing in Ontario has been destroyed. The softwood lumber industry in British Columbia was wrecked. Now the oil industry has been destroyed because of OPEC, because of Saudi Arabia, because of my government and your government's insistence on doing business with Sharia law-ruled Muslim countries that kill gays, make women cover themselves up. And so this is what we're dealing with. And so there's collusion at the very highest levels between the U.S. government. Now, here's the deal. I think that this election in the U.S. is so huge and the wrongdoing goes so deep that they are going to try to steal this election. I predict that it's going to be a landslide for Donald Trump, but they are definitely going to pull out all the stops. We just got the news that James Comey has dropped the investigation on Hillary Clinton in light of the new emails from Anthony Weiner for a second time. And so they're either scared or in the bag, one of the two. And I predict that this is David versus Goliath, epic battle. I've never seen anything like this, but it's very important. And I think Hillary knows too. And indeed Obama, that the criminality is so high that if it got investigated after Obama gets out of office and Hillary doesn't win the election, that they'll both find themselves in jail, right alongside Loretta Lynch, now Comey, everybody that's covered up all these heinous crimes.
Well, which crime? I mean, when you talk about the heinous crimes here, I mean, what are we talking about? Like the Clinton era things?
Well, okay, so
Bruce,
you
Ted
take your,
Foster, what was his name? He didn't commit suicide, but he was murdered and that
Vince
kind of
Foster
a thing.
was found in Fort Marcy Park. But go back further. Go back to when the Clintons were in Arkansas and the Iran-Contra deal and the cocaine being flown in and out of Mena, Arkansas airport. If I'm a guy in the middle of Alberta and I know about that, the world knows about it. And then you go to the dropping of the Glass-Steagall Act. Okay, and then which led to the housing and mortgage crisis. But but let me ask you this: did Bush do anything about that? No.
Well, I mean, what you're talking about, and this is in Roger Stone's book, that the Clintons and the Bushes were both in on that. The airport thing in Arkansas and the cocaine and all that kind of thing, including Jeb. Apparently, he was involved with cocaine sales when he was in school, according to Roger Stone's book. So I just wanted to make sure I knew what you were referring to. Let me ask you this, Mike. I mean, do you think some outside force, I'm not going to say who it is trying to manipulate the election?
I think multiple forces are trying to manipulate the election. I mean, we were talking about media in the UK and Canada. First of all, those are outside forces trying to manipulate, if not Americans, the rest of the world. So, I mean, you got to ask yourself, why would they care if it had nothing to do with them? But the thing is, it does have to do with them because, like I said, the tentacles go so deep. So outside forces are definitely messing with the election. I mean, I think I'm not talking about the Russians either.
But you and I both agree that the media is corrupted.
Agreed.
And the whole system is basically corrupt. The media is owned by this handful of special interests that also control most of the levers of power and Congress, and they get the legislation they want and the national security state and all that. I think that's obvious, and anybody that doesn't see that is really
got their head in the sand.
But when we're talking about manipulation of this election, I'm talking about like the WikiLeaks thing, for example. All of that stuff, it was leaked. Only one side is being targeted. For example, nobody's released all of the, whatever Trump campaign emails, for example. I'm sure if you any trove of emails from any campaign and you go through them all, who knows what you might find. So, I mean, that's what I'm kind of asking. Do you think somebody's trying to mess around with that, and is it okay with you that that's going on? Or, I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, here's my take on it. Trump was not supposed to win the GOP in the first place, okay? And so if there was anything they could have found, it would have been found then, and you can guarantee that there are hackers going through Trump's stuff looking for whatever they can find.
I mean, that's what's suspicious. Because everyone's exposed. We are living in a turnkey police state.
Yep.
There is no way our emails are private, and we can see that. And that goes for any campaign, any organization, any political party. But in this case, only one party is being targeted. And that, I think, is disturbing because we don't know who it is.
Well,
people say it's Putin. A lot of people say it's Russia. The intelligence services say it's Russia.
They're not. No. The intelligence services are not saying it's Russia. They're the ones that are bought and paid for. But come on.
Well, look, I don't believe anything the intelligence services say ever. So I don't even care if they say it. But it seems that the official intelligence agencies in the U.S., whatever you want to say, why that is, I don't know. But they are it seems, universally accusing Putin of doing this. So I don't care if it's Putin or not. Point is, we're being messed around with, and I don't think we should take that lying down.
Well, let me just go back to what the question you asked me. Do I think that's right or wrong? I think right or wrong is irrelevant at this point because both sides' followers believe they're right in their heart.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, I just think, I've read the emails too. I think the emails are very interesting, but it does disturb me to know that somebody has released this so that they could accomplish an end that's in their interests, not necessarily ours.
Well, maybe it's in the interests of the planet. Justice be done, though the heavens fall. I mean,
it may be, but you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So, look, Mike, what do you think's going to happen tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I think that there's many possibilities. I mean, listen, I've got a buddy that is a firefighter in a major city in the U.S. I'm not going to say his name or which one, but in a conversation with me, I asked him the same question, and he said, I don't think it matters what happens in this election because, for an example, when he said that when the guys on his department go to a restaurant to have something to eat when they're wearing their uniforms, They never go with less than 3 guys, and one of them's job is to watch the door with a pistol, because they have people saying, people think they're cops, and they have them saying things like, we should kill you, under their breath, and they hear it all the time. And he said that the nation is so absolutely divided that if Trump gets in, you're going to see rioting, and if Hillary gets in, you're going to see rioting. Either way, because it's so polarized. And indeed, members of my own family in the United States, I was talking to one of them this morning, and my family is divided out into camps that won't talk to each other anymore because of who they support.
God, I know, man.
And that's happening. I just spoke to one this morning. And so I think that Trump's going to win in a landslide officially, but they're going to try and definitely steal it because they have to, and because they're looking at serious time if they don't. And so, in the meantime, if the country goes bananas, then that's going to change the whole landscape right there. So that's my prediction. Trump will, when it comes down to sheer numbers, he will win. But the corrupt media and government are going to steal it, and America will be very, very angry, and I'm not sure how that's going to look. I hope for the best.
Yeah, one way or another, I guess.
That's it, yeah.
A lot of people are going to be angry. Well, look, Mike, before we go, let me ask you this. You have a perch in the alternative media. I don't know if this election has, given you more readers or listeners than before, but what do you think this campaign will do in terms of the alternative media? Do you think more people will turn to it and have more confidence in what, and I know it's a big pot of things, the alternative media, but because the Trump campaign has relied a lot, especially on, things like Breitbart and Drudge and these other websites. Drudge has already been, huge for many, many years, of course. But in terms of being mainstream, it's the word mainstream almost doesn't mean anything anymore.
It doesn't.
You know what I'm saying. But do you think it's going to give a boost, say, to the alternative media as we knew it before?
It's and that's another thing that could go either way. I mean, James O'Keefe said, "We in the alternative media and the hackers, we're the barbarians at the gates." They were talking about fairness rules when it comes to broadcast media, because guys like Limbaugh, Hannity, Alex Jones, they absolutely dominate, like I'm talking dominate in the numbers when it comes to media. So they've been talking about shutting that down, and indeed Matt Drudge came out and said that he had a conversation with a Supreme Court justice who told him flat out, you are done. We've got the votes now. And so they're going to make it illegal to link to other articles and things like that. They're bringing in Hillary Clinton has told her people that she doesn't want to sign on to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but indeed in the WikiLeaks emails, they said that, it was assured to the big boys at Wall Street and overseas that she will. And if that happens, you'll have foreign countries able to have a hand in the creation of laws in the United States in regard not just to media, but industry and all kinds of things. So, yeah, this is do or die for both sides, literally, and I truly believe that. And they just and why do the dance, right? Like, if it was such a good thing, and they had so much power, and Obama's got a pen and a phone, and he can make whatever executive order he wants, why have they been pussyfooting around if they wanted to do this the whole time? Well, the fact is, I think that they're a little bit scared of the mood of the American public, but at the same time, they're more scared for their own asses. So that's the situation.
Well, I mean,
We're
the ground is shifting.
Standoff.
The ground is shifting on trade. I mean, it's shifted on trade. I mean, because the people who have negotiated the treaties are discredited. And we can't be doing it the way we've been doing it.
Well, trade, it's in the toilet.
It's that is a problem, is that the people are sitting at the table.
Well, that is a problem. Why is it more profitable for a company to outsource workers to India, Pakistan, or Mexico?
And what about when they're all of the workers there and here are replaced by robots?
Well, you have to ask yourself. It's pretty stupid and short-sighted on behalf of a company, because you think about it. So Harley Davidson moves their production to India, and how many people in India can afford a Harley Davidson? And why is it cheaper for them to build it there and ship it back to the States? You have to ask yourself these questions. So,
well, you know what? This is interesting, Mike, and you might be interested in this. I was speaking to Dan Collins. Dan Collins is an analyst, and he lives in Shanghai, and he's lived in China for 20 years. And what he told me is the reason that he thinks Trump would be better and that it's important to cut the corporate tax rate is because, I said to him, look, all these large corporations, they have 1 million accountants, so they can avoid the tax anyway, right? And he said, yes, but the way that they avoid it is by shipping equipment and jobs offshore and then keeping the profits offshore. And that's why he thinks Trump is right and they should cut the corporate tax rate, and that's how it will reverse the tide on jobs. That's what Dan Collins said to me. Well,
I agree with that statement. I mean, listen, you couldn't...
I mean, I'm not an economist, so I don't know. But when people talk about it, they don't go... They don't explain it further, because it's true that these large multinationals have the accountants and so on to avoid this tax. However, how they avoid it is offshoring. That's how they avoid it.
Well, there you go. So there's a financial incentive to take work out of the country, which makes it more profitable, right? And that's probably just one example. But, I mean, think about it. You could not have destroyed America so bad. I mean, God, look at Detroit. Last time I was in Detroit, I couldn't believe I was in America. I went driving around and just looking, and there was places where I went that it looked like a city crew hadn't been in there in 2 years. There was grass a foot high out of the cracks in the middle of the street, not one window intact. I mean, we're talking about the shining city on the hill. At one time, Detroit had a bigger GDP than just about any country.
Ah, man. Deindustrialization
is real. So, I mean,
it is real.
So, America, I think, is the linchpin, and it's got to be taken down in order to destroy freedom for humanity worldwide. As long as America stands, then it's impossible to take things as far as they want to go. But if you remember in 1984, a boot print on the side of the head of humanity forever, and that is what they want, indeed, I believe, firmly. Because this couldn't have just happened generically. It had to happen on purpose. And they've lied and lied and lied, and the American people have suffered greatly. The Canadian people have suffered. We're suffering up here. It's the same agenda. And that's what you have to... I mean, I was just at a province-wide protest yesterday because our province, our provincial government, we had a conservative government for over 40 years, and they got lazy and complacent and entitled, and the people finally got angry enough to do the unthinkable and vote in a socialist NDP, or New Democrat Party government. Well, in all fairness, they did exactly what they're going to do and constituted a carbon tax, and now our local school division doesn't know how they're going to pay to bus kids to school next year. It's $100,000 out of their budget with this new carbon tax. So, I mean, that's another good example of industry being completely shut down, but now it's coming down to the local level. So, the shutting down of America is happening to Canada. Look at unemployment rates and immigration in Germany and the UK. This is happening worldwide, and this election, I believe, is symbolic of a last stand.
Mike, thank you for being with us. If we're all in one piece next week, we'll get together again and see what you have to say about the outcome. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me on, William, and everybody can check out AmericanHawkRadio.com. We are live every Saturday on the Genesis Communications Network from 2 to 4 Central.
Now, the consternation of my next guest, Patrik Etschmeyer, a Swiss columnist we've translated on many occasions, and we've had him on the show quite a few times, will be immediately evident to you. He does not consider the Trump campaign a legitimate campaign. This is Patrik Etschmeyer of Switzerland.
My next guest is Patrik Etschmeyer, a columnist in Switzerland who has written extensively about the United States, foreign affairs, science and the environment, and cultural issues for many European publications, most recently Ensuite.ch. And some of his work can be read in English at worldmeets.us, and it is a great honor to welcome him back to the World Meets America Report. Patrik, how are you today?
Well, I'm doing okay. Thanks, Will.
I want to ask you about something we discussed 8 months ago. As you recall,
yes,
you were more than a little shocked by the tenor of the 2016 presidential race. And now you say?
Well, the thing is, at some point you get numb. But that doesn't mean you're not scared, because what we see here is just the descent into, well, mud-flinging and, sheer horror, I have to say. It's just beyond belief.
Yeah, it has become certainly a mudslinging contest. But the thing is, you realize that there is such a dichotomy in terms of people who support Donald Trump and people who support Hillary Clinton. And then I guess there's the people who hate both of them and don't know what the hell to do. Let me just get on the record here, even if it seems obvious to you. What is the most shocking elements? What are the most shocking elements of this race to you, and which of the candidates do you favor?
Well, the most shocking thing about it is that obviously facts, at least on the side of the Trump campaign, facts are completely irrelevant. I mean, let's not just talk about what he says about his opponent. Let's also talk about what he says about some fact about the world. I mean, he completely denies that there's climate change. And I know that among his supporters are people that staunchly disbelieve those scientific facts as well. But the thing is, a campaign leader should start to get to grips with reality. Because if you base your whole campaign on stuff you imagine, stuff you want to be, on wishful thinking, on hateful thinking, not based in reality, but on what your preconceptions are without ever checking in on what actually is, you're going to base your whole policies on the lies you tell yourself.
Well, then, Patrik, do you think that what Donald Trump has said do you think these are more sort of a campaign tactic, ways to get leverage in the electorate, or that he actually believes the things that he says?
Well, the thing, it doesn't really matter, because whether he believes it or not, he'll have to act on it. As soon as your whole campaign building is made of lies, you are going to have to live in this building once you are elected. Otherwise, they are going to lynch you, and he's not going to risk that. So he'll have to follow up. And if you look at some of the proposals he has for the selection of his staff, I mean, it's crazy. If the guy that's running Breitbart News, I mean, who knows what he's going to get for a post? We don't know yet. But as soon as you descended into this hell of dishonesty and lies, you'll just have to keep on going with it. But
Patrik, you realize that the other side says the same thing about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, but
that she's just better at lies. She's just more careful.
Yeah, but the thing is,
et cetera.
The thing is, it's. I'm not talking about the lies they say about one another. I'm talking about the lies he says about the basics of politics, which should be anchored in the physical reality of the world. And if you say, because you've got a cold spell somewhere, that climate change is not real, if you start reaching out to the vaccination deniers by telling them, yes, I heard about this kid that got autism, while all that stuff is debunked, you see him pandering to people who lost grip on reality, and by promoting this kind of thinking, he promotes a general loss of reality among the people voting, among the population. I mean, if the leaders are going totally crazy and superstitious, there might be something in that. And
well, let's talk about the whole issue of rigged, things being rigged.
Well, he doesn't have any proofs.
Just let me ask you. Put it this way: there are a lot of ways things can be rigged. I mean, it's a very sort of vague statement. I mean, I have said, and I think you have agreed with at least some of it, that the system we have, for example, we have a media that is a profit-making enterprise, essentially. They're not really there to inform the American people per se. They're really there to make a profit, and the companies that own them have their interests, and those interests have nothing to do with informing the American people. So that was something that I would say was true before Trump. It's true now. It'll probably be true afterwards, no?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that...
So, but there's a lot of kinds of rigging.
Yeah,
right?
but the thing is, he says the system is rigged not in his favor. But, I mean, he's a staunch believer in capitalism. So, I mean, he should be the last person to complain about it. And, you know, the thing is, he's only saying it's rigged when he's looking bad. He said that the polls are rigged when they were looking bad. Now that the polls are not looking bad anymore, they're not rigged anymore. I mean,
the amount of hypocrisy and the amount of absurdity coming out of people's mouths, and not only his, is absolutely overwhelming.
Yeah, but when you look at fact checkers that say, okay, about 20% of Hillary Clinton's stuff is questionable, some stuff is wrong, and like 90% of his statements used to be wrong. I mean, you've got a person that has been proven to have cheated contractors, to have sexually molested and attacked people, to have total meltdowns, to walk around and telling people that he's got the best hair, the best temper, the best whatever. I mean, this person is deranged. I don't see anything else. I mean, whenever something is going wrong, he's just going off like crazy. And he's a coward. I mean, remember his Mexico bashing? And when he was in Mexico, he was standing there like a meek little lamb. And a few hours later in Arizona, he was bashing the Mexicans again. And I have to say, well, if you're such a big man, why didn't you speak up when you were there?
Well, I mean, look, the amazing thing about it is that the man has shot himself in the foot over and over again and said the most absurd things. He'd said things that I've found very offensive over and over again. And yet, people are so angry. And there's an incoherent anger that's on the right and the left. And then there is the anger of people who, you know, would probably be put in the category of nativists or racists or whatever. They're, you know, setting that all aside, there is a huge incoherent anger out there, and there are people ready to roll the dice, and they don't care if it's Trump or anyone else, apparently. Well, that seems to be the case.
Well, you just have, you just have to blame somebody for whatever. And then you tell the people to go and lynch them. And if you pander to a big enough group and say, you are the victims and you are going to get your revenge, because basically that's what he is saying. He is basically saying, we are taking America back. And you have been disenfranchised. You, the white American working class people with only, medium grade education. And those people are doing worse, but they started doing worse 30 years ago, 40 years ago, compared to others. And the thing is, he is a representative of the group of people, or he wants to be a representative of the group of people that basically took the money away. If you look at the distribution of wealth in the whole world, but especially in the US, you see that the middle class is losing money, and they're not losing the money to the poor, which is what he's saying. The money is moving upwards. So it's the billionaires. He claims to be one. I don't even know whether he's one because he doesn't give his tax returns out. So, I mean, he could have 3 billion somewhere and 8 billion in debts with the Deutsche Bank. I don't know. Nobody knows.
But that's the irony, isn't it? Because he's saying, like, I've been there. I know what's going on. This time, I'm going to do it for you. That's his whole appeal, right?
Well, I've been there. I've cheated your kind. And I know how to cheat you, and I'm doing it again. He's a fraud. He's a cheat. I don't know how much money he's got. I don't know how successful his stuff is. I mean, a real billionaire wouldn't deal with chicken shit. Sorry for the language, but outfits like he does with pandering some stupid stakes and slapping his name on anything. Have you ever seen Bill Gates' stakes? No, no. Have you ever seen at Bloomberg University that's trying to victimize people? And he slaps his name on everything just because it's marketable, seemingly because he's out of money. Otherwise, he wouldn't do that.
Well, I mean,
would a real businessman do that?
The idea that the Republicans would embrace somebody, this is the Republican Party of quote-unquote personal responsibility and fiscal conservatism, etc., would choose a New York real estate tycoon as their nominee. I mean, that is through the looking glass. Totally. I mean, that's just the universe that I grew up in. However, I think this is just another indication that the anger of the electorate, the inchoate anger of the electorate, which was incredible in 2008, it's even bigger now.
But
and it may lead people.
Fox News, you've got talk radio, you've got those outlets that keep fanning the anger and basically saying there cannot be cooperation because the others are evil. And as soon as you describe in a democracy your opponents as basically evil, you are heading into the direction of the Third Reich, of Turkey as it is today, of Hungary as it seems to be today. You are basically heading into totalitarianism and into a violent society because you say dialogue is not possible, compromise is not possible, and the Republican Party lived this for the last 8 years totally. They locked down over smaller policy issues the whole government. They were willing to basically crash land the whole thing. And people, they are blaming both sides. And sometimes they were to blame too, the Democrats as well, because they wouldn't budge. But I mean, you cannot always budge to insane demands, because when you give in once, you have to give in a second time. And this confrontational style basically stops democracy in its tracks.
But, I mean, this is the bargain. He made, look, whether he believes it or not, I have no idea, but he decided he was going to co-opt the extreme right of the Republican Party and get the nomination, and it worked like a charm. So either he believes it or he doesn't believe it. Now he's in the general election, and he has been, and surprisingly to me at least, he has been really unwilling to turn to the center and calm the center, the people that he needs to get him elected. And even though he has refused to do that, which is a traditional thing that everybody expected him to do, he's still only a couple of points behind Hillary Clinton here.
It's also about sexism. Blatant sexism. I mean, do you really think Hillary Clinton would be alive today still if she had stacked up as many bad things as Trump has? I mean,
nobody would survive what Trump has said and done in any other context.
I'm just saying it. A big part of the American electorate consists of sexist pigs. And
well, I mean, it is remarkable to me that so many
here.
men don't seem to think it's a big deal what he said, but so many women are so upset about it that I've met. Anyway.
The thing is, if a woman says something and fights for something, she is a bitch or bitch or whatever. If a man does that, he's a guy with conviction and stamina. If a woman does stuff to get her ahead, she's a conniving monster. If a man does that, he's just doing what needs to be done. So, I mean, this double standard, it's so blatant. And
you mean like women in politics in general?
Yeah, women in politics, women in business. I mean, if you look at how women in business are looked at, and women in and men in business are looked at, what men get away with, and it's just, well, that's.
But here's the weird thing, Patrik. I mean, isn't more than half the electorate female?
Yes, and it's.
So I mean, if what you're saying is true, then why doesn't he just get defeated in a landslide and settle the issue right?
Seemingly, there is a certain part of females that just hate other women even more than they hate a sexist.
Or at least Hillary.
Yeah.
At least Hillary.
In
the case of Hillary,
or at least Hillary, because she's been seemingly around too long. But I mean, when you look at the demographics, it shows that Hillary doesn't stand a chance among men, but among women, she has a rather big majority, seemingly from what I saw about the demographics of the electorate. And this is obviously can only be explained by hate for women in politics.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, there are a lot of troubling elements to what's happened and the reaction and the counter-reaction. It is something that will be studied for many years, I'm sure. Well, let me ask you this, Pat, which is something that I find somewhat interesting. Do you think, given Trump's campaign, his reliance on alternative media sources and some would say conspiracy theory, that a conspiracy theory-based way of thinking is becoming mainstream or will become mainstream?
It is already mainstream.
Is it? I mean, I still get the sense that if you're going to quote Breitbart or if you're going to quote, InfoWars, there are a lot of people that will still look at you like,
there's a lot of people.
That's not really.
I mean, what's mainstream is mainstream, majority accepted. The thing is, since those alternative media, I don't know what an alternative they are.
When I say alternative media, I just mean media that is not mainstream media.
Media that's not mainstream. I mean, if it's, you could call it inventive media because they don't rely on facts.
Well, like this is alternative media, for example. Our program is also alternative media. It's just basically the media that is not on your television yet, and that you have to go onto the internet to see, hear, or listen to. So it's a big, there's left, there's right, there's every kind of person in there.
Yeah, the thing is, I think information should be based on some kind of reality. And if they rely on media that's basically not bothering with checking any facts, and if this is and this seems to be the foundation of a lot of the Trumpish stuff, then we are heading into a very troublesome time, because then true is not what is true, but true is going to be what's okay for the people that say what is true. And this is totalitarianism again. I mean, you're coming back to a dictatorship, because as soon as the reality isn't what's deciding for your policies, well, what is? Then it's fantasy. I mean, just to get...
Well, I mean, it does seem that the interpretation of reality on right and left has been bifurcating for some time. And maybe this is the big climactic break. I don't know.
Yeah, but the thing is, some things are reality. I mean, just to give you examples out of history. Under Stalin, they developed an alternative biology because they wouldn't want to believe in what the capitalist medicine produced. So there was a whole field of so-called science that was not based on the reality of the biology, but on what they demanded to be different. So, and you had the new German physics under Hitler, which was basically there to contradict the Jewish physics that Einstein invented. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you've got realities that just are there. And if
I know what you mean.
Trump is starting to deny those realities too, when he's talking about, well, the whole vaccination thing. I mean, he's steering down a path where he's just looking for likes on Facebook, seemingly.
And he's not the only one.
Yeah, and
the mainstream media is kind of in the same. They're all, look, this is what's driving me crazy, okay? We have a mainstream media that's discredited because of this, just what you're talking about right now, in terms of all they care about is Facebook likes, profits, eyes glued to the screen. They're not really out to inform the American people. That's not really their game. So if you start from there, and then you have these other news, like there's like the Daily Caller reported that George Soros has deep ties to this company that makes voting machines in a number of states. And there are people on the right who think they're all fixed. They're going to, Soros' company is, they're trying to make these machines vote left or vote for Hillary or what have you. But there's no mention of how the machines in question that they're talking about are not deployed in the United States yet. They've only been deployed in Britain at this point. But who cares, because this is a great talking point on the right, and you'll hear it everywhere you go on the right. So I don't know what to do about it, but it is troubling to me that there is no legitimate media out there that people can have confidence in, because it's profit motive or it's something else, but it isn't about informing the public.
Well, the thing is, if the public doesn't buy or pay for media anymore that informs them, because the public has been told that they can choose their reality. Mm-hmm. And the public believes this and is too lazy to go out of their comfort zone, the public is going to get what it deserves. The trouble is that not only those that choose it get what they deserve, but those that are not choosing it are getting what they do not deserve. So informed people are going to be in a situation where they have to defend themselves for not repeating lies, for doubting fear-mongering, for pointing out inconsistencies and untruthfulness. I mean, you're not the only ones that go through this. We have this polarization here. And what's really interesting, right now, seemingly in Germany, there are some courts preparing motions against Mark Zuckerberg and his top management for dissemination of racial hatred. Because they are not keeping the laws, and up to now, well, it doesn't really apply. Yes, you're doing business here, you're making money here. I mean,
people who are members of Facebook posting things.
Yeah, and
we're not saying Mark Zuckerberg is,
no,
but people on Facebook
and if you have a website in Germany, you have to remove these posts quickly when they are pointed out to you, and you have to look for them yourselves. And since they are really sluggish doing that, they are preparing now, motions against Facebook and the management. So it could be, even if he stays out, that if he ever comes to Germany, he might be arrested. Who knows?
Well, listen, Pat, I'm going to have to end this interview. Let me ask you this. What do people that you know, what's the mood in Switzerland, if you can characterize it, about the elections right now?
Well, people are worried, but for some reasons that you might not understand. Right now, the Swiss franc is taking an upswing again, which is really bad for our economy, because all the stuff we produce gets more expensive outside of Switzerland, which is bad for our export economy, which is a really huge deal. And this happens because the markets are really nervous about the US. So,
right.
So
they're taking refuge in the Swiss franc.
Yeah, exactly. And this should actually worry some of the American electorate too, because if the markets, which is what Trump is there for basically, are worried about him getting into power, well, maybe he's really not that great a choice, even for those who believe in capitalism.
Pat, what do you think's going to happen on Tuesday?
I haven't got a clue. Look,
okay.
I mean, you can predict, you can say, what do you hope will happen, but do I know what's happening?
Well, I guess you know what we all know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what is publicly available to us to know.
I mean, it would be a real relief if an asteroid hits Trump's plane midair. That would be nice.
That was Patrik Etschmeyer discussing Donald Trump's aircraft and his desire to see it blow up, which is very unusual for Patrik, and I think does show the depth of angst toward Donald Trump in Central Europe. Next up, we have Dan Collins. Dan Collins is a financial analyst. He reads, writes, and speaks Chinese. He lives in Shanghai. And we're going to talk about a little discussed angle of the campaign, the China angle. You know that the Chinese and the Russians are getting closer and closer every day, partly because of the way the Russians feel they've been treated by the West and the United States. And Dan is going to discuss a couple of very interesting things, including why Trump is better because he's going to cut corporate tax rates. And why does that matter even when large multinational corporations have a team, huge teams of accountants, and they can get out of any of these taxes? Because the way that they avoid these taxes with their army of accountants is, according to Dan, offshoring jobs and equipment and keeping all the profits offshore, which is the problem. So it's important to note when people are talking about the corporate tax rate and when people's eyes glaze over thinking to themselves, well, these large companies can afford to hire accountants and not pay the tax. Well, the way they avoid paying the tax, according to Dan, is to offshore jobs and workers, which is bad for workers in the United States. This is Dan Collins. Welcome back to the World Meets America report. Dan Collins is the founder of the China Money Report, and he's the founder of Tiger Hill Capital, which is a Hong Kong-based asset management and corporate advisory company. Decades ago, he graduated from Michigan State. Was it Michigan State, Dan?
Yes, it was. Yep.
Michigan State. Graduated, moved to China, learned to speak Mandarin, and never looked back. And he has a feel for what's happening there that very few people do. Now, very little attention has been paid on the China angle to this election. Mr. Trump regularly refers to China, and on the one hand he says they're great negotiators, they're getting the best of us, they're taking advantage of us, they're smarter than us, so it's sort of a compliment. But on the other hand, he does blame them. He blames Beijing for a lot of the, our trade woes and the job problem and all those other things. So I thought Dan would be the right guy to talk to. He also writes columns for publications all over the place. He's a frequent guest on financial programs like the Kaiser Report, the Kerry Lutz Show, Wall Street for Main Street, etc. Dan, thank you for taking the time and giving us your comments about the election today.
Thanks, man. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you, man. Seriously. Now, it's a conversation I've wanted to have for a long time with you. It would appear that Beijing is greatly dissatisfied with Trump, if one believes the state media over there, while at the same time Moscow is one of the few global capitals in favor of a Trump presidency, as far as I can see. Mm-hmm. So let's start with Beijing. What does the leadership make of Trump and a potential Trump administration, as far as you can gather?
Well, Beijing, obviously, they don't want to be called a currency manipulator. They don't want more tariffs put up against their products. They like to be seen as a free market economy, which is absolutely not the case. State-owned, the state has interfered in a lot of industries, many in particular, such as steel, which is completely gone now in the United States. But
they've switched it a little. Like they basically they own parts of these companies. Yeah. So they're sort of state-funded companies.
They own some, and then there's private. There's public steel companies and there's private steel companies. It's a mixture.
But it's very opaque. You can't really tell where the money is coming from. Essentially, if you just look at market, the market and things like that.
Yeah, but for the state-owned steel company, it's owned by, it could be local Beijing government or a local provincial government or the local city. It's definitely owned by the government, which means they get reduced rates on electricity. They get free access to bank loans they wouldn't get. There's all types of
they're favored.
Sure.
They're favored, and so their opposition, who doesn't have such funding, is obviously at a disadvantage.
Like steel plants in Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
That's why they're all gone.
It's notable that you're from Michigan, too, because we're talking about the U.S. election, and it looks like Michigan's up for grabs right now in terms of the Trump and Clinton. So you're saying so Beijing doesn't like the rhetoric.
The rhetoric, absolutely. Obviously, they'll be against any kind of trade, any trade actions or actions on their currency. Trump calls them a currency manipulator. Are they a manipulator? Yes, of course. They go out in the market every day and manipulate the currency. I mean, it's obvious. You can see you can see
they are currency manipulators, but we are as well.
Of course we are.
That's true.
We're all in a race.
Because we're printing money, and if you're printing money, that's kind of manipulating currency as well, because you're debasing the currency, and
exactly. They make goods, and we pretend to pay them, in printed money.
So listen, Dan. So the Chinese leadership, they don't like his rhetoric. Does that mean that they prefer Hillary Clinton?
It's hard to say. I would say the other thing quickly to add on is I've heard this from some people, that they have sent feelers out to the Trump campaign asking. And what they're most concerned about, the number one concern they have, is the U.S. corporate tax rate. And they're worried he's going to reduce it. Because with the world's highest corporate tax rate, It's very difficult to get any of these Fortune 500 companies to move plant and equipment back to the United States. So the United States labor rate, being stagnant for decades, has basically become pretty competitive now. But yet they're not going to put their plant and equipment in the United States. You'll put it in Mexico or somewhere else because they're not going to pay the 38% tax.
But here's the thing, Dan. I mean, do they ever really pay that rate? I mean,
No,
these
they don't.
companies that have, who knows how many accountants up the wazoo, they're not paying that rate.
No, they don't. They don't pay the rate because all of the real assets are now offshore. So the way you get out of not paying it is putting the plant and equipment outside the country. And then you run the business through the BVI or the Hong Kong. So those places aren't actually touching goods, but they're doing the paperwork. You run it through the Netherlands, these kinds of things. So until we get a hold of our tax structure, like some of the other countries got smart and did decades ago, we're not going to go anywhere. So that's I think one of their concerns. How do we compete against China when they have a 15% corporate tax rate, 17% value-added duties you get back when you export, and then we're over in the United States trying to pay that kind of, it's a completely different model. That's why when the economists like to talk about a free trade system, it's really laughable. I mean, China today has a 16% average tariff rate against U.S. goods. We have
right. I mean, the phrase free trade should be banned.
It should be banned. I mean, it's kind of a joke.
It's a ridiculous thing to say. Even if you have trade rules that you all agree on,
they don't follow them. They don't follow. They're mercantile. The countries.
But I'm saying, even if you did have trade rules that we all followed and agreed on, that's still not free trade.
No,
You've
because
got rules.
The systems are totally different. So that's what Beijing was concerned about. Would they like a Hillary? I would say if you look at who backs Hillary, you're talking about basically a Washington, D.C. insider neocon establishment who has been behind this Asian pivot, which is to ring China with military bases. So I think for China, it's kind of the, two poisoned apples. I don't think either one they're going to be.
I know, man, but I've been reading the state-run media, and they are not going after Hillary at all. Hardly at all.
Yeah. No,
Am I wrong? I mean, I'm looking.
No, I don't see much, and I see only a few things on Trump. But keep in mind that China, culturally, they don't believe in interfering in other countries' politics.
Yeah, but look, man, that you have to agree or admit that over the last couple of years they've become far more nationalist, and especially like the Global Times, for example, they will have on a regular basis things that would seem to not be in agreement with that policy.
Oh yeah, Global Times is.
It's going on a lot. They have a. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I didn't interrupt you.
No, yeah, I mean, you're right. Global Times is a very nationalistic publication, and you can definitely get the feel of the nationalism side of a viewpoint by checking that.
I mean, it's state-run media. It's all state-run media, so they have this. This is part of their game plan, one way or another. We have to assume. So so you've got China, and they seem, I say, lukewarm about Trump. I probably agree with that. And now you've got the Russia angle on this whole thing as well. And the interesting thing is, Russia and China, they sort of have been making a compact with each other, and they've been working together more often. They've had military exercises together, some unprecedented work together. How do you see this? It seems to be a bit of a separation between the two, because it does look like Russia would really prefer Donald Trump. I mean, Putin would certainly prefer Donald Trump. I don't think anyone would deny it.
Yeah.
Unless that's some super psyop that nobody understands, because people do seem to think he favors Trump.
Right.
So how does that work with Beijing and Moscow? This difference, or does it make any difference?
I don't really see a difference. I mean, why does Russia favor Trump against the Clinton? Clinton is part of this Washington, D.C. bureaucracy that really has been training against Russia and the Soviet Union for decades. And then the end of the Cold War happens, and we don't lay these people off like we should have. And they're in there continually ringing Russia with military bases. We did the coup in Ukraine. So, of course, this is the Washington, D.C. bureaucracy. And you can see why Russia doesn't like him at all, and you can see why China would be concerned about him.
Her or him?
I think.
Are we talking about Hillary or are we talking about Trump?
Her for those reasons, and Trump probably
Right.
based on economic reasons.
Right. So the Chinese worry about Trump for economic reasons, and the Russians worry about Hillary because, well, basically, Hillary has, in Putin's mind, encouraged protest against him during the last election campaign, and Putin sees her as an adversary over many, many years. So he has reason not to like her.
And with that, we lost our connection with Dan Collins, and that is too bad because we had a little more we wanted to talk to him about, but we're going to catch up to him again after the election and see what he has to say about the fallout.
I like to think World Meets America and World Meets Us provide a bridge for people who still rely on mainstream media to get a handle on the alternative media, which is a real and growing phenomena and a reflection of well-founded public despair over the corrupted profit-seeking conglomerates that own the major media networks. Now, my next guest is an alternative media firebrand who isn't shy about pissing people off if he believes what he's saying. Now, of all of my guests on this program, David Weiss is the most likely to shock you. He has argued and sought to prove, for example, that the majority of mass shootings in the United States are staged by the state, and that all of us are subject to the greatest hoax in history, namely that the earth is round. But we're not going to discuss any of that today. You can find David and his work, massive presence on YouTube, and David will provide the necessary information in a few minutes. Now, whatever you think of all that, there's little question that David Weiss has become a fixture and a force in alternative media, so I wanted to ask him what he thinks the Trump campaign's impact on alternative media might be, and a few other issues that having to do with WikiLeaks and things. David, thank you for being on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, William.
So, just to be clear for the audience, you and I haven't discussed the election or anything else, so I have no idea what you're going to say, right?
I don't think you have unless you've seen my videos I've made on it. I made a few. I'm not a political person, but right. I noticed some, if you'd like to use the word conspiratorial stuff about Miss Hillary. I have my opinions on Trump and WikiLeaks and all of that.
Okay. Well, okay. So I'm just going to start with a couple of questions. We'll get to what you want to say about it. If there are things you actually want to say that aren't in response to my questions, I'm fine with that. Now, we're just a few days out from the elections. Everyone's edgy. Everybody's angry and impatient and, ready for it to end and all. Now, knowing you as I do, let me start with the question of whether the elections are rigged, and if so, how, in your opinion? What do you think about that question?
If you're talking about the selection, it's really a selection, not an election. It's completely rigged, but it may have gotten away from them.
Well, this is what I want to be clear on, because I know there are many ways for things to be rigged, and I certainly think, and I have been saying for years, that things are, rigged in many respects. So I just want to be clear about what we're talking about when you say that they're rigged. You're talking about the actual voting or the system in general or the major media, or what are we talking about?
So the voting it's mostly electronic voting, in a lot of places. But, you've seen the videos where they're stuffing the ballots, into the voting bag or whatever. The electronic voting has been proven numerous times that you can just put in percentages in there, and it doesn't matter what the vote is. They already have their selected winner. And
so, in other words, all the safeguards that are discussed in the mainstream media and from public officials, you basically don't buy into that at all.
It's not that I don't buy into it. It's been proven that they're garbage. Obama came out the other day and said, thinking that the election is fixed, that rigged is just ludicrous. Meanwhile, and when he was campaigning to be president, he was complaining that the election was fixed. Exactly what he's saying we're crazy for saying. But there's video, there's a couple of voting centers from the previous election where they hid cameras above the basketball hoop or whatever, and they showed them stuffing the boxes. That's just one way.
Okay, so in terms of the actual voting and the vote counting, that's rigged
Completely.
In your mind.
Completely.
And what else?
They also program the people to believe that it's going to be a close election. So no matter what happens, everyone's like, oh, I could buy that. The polls are saying that, they're neck and neck right now. But that's garbage. I mean, Trump is winning by a landslide. But, Soros came out the other day and said, Trump may win the popular vote, but the electoral vote is already been decided that Hillary will be the president.
So, in other words, the idea that, by the way, have you spoken to women about what Donald Trump has said and gotten to what they think about it? And you are aware that, 50% of the electorate is female. So there are a lot of women who are angry about his behavior. Would you agree on that?
They're hypocrites. They're
whatever. You can say what you like. You have a male sexual organ like I do, and we think differently about this than women do.
That's not true. There's lots of women.
Well, that's what I've found.
Yeah,
That's just my experience.
There's lots of women that buy right into that, that this whole, sexual, feminism stuff. It's a false argument.
No, David.
Yes.
It's abuse of power when somebody says, I'm a great celebrity, so I can do anything I want and I can grab this or that genital. That is offensive to people. And if you don't think that it is, I think you're living in a dream.
No. I hear you. People say a lot of things, and as I'm not really defending him, but it's really nothing. He said it in a bunch of guys. The Clinton News Network.
Well, you say it's nothing.
But hang on a second.
I don't know if that's true, Dave, because you and I don't react the same way to something like this.
Lots of women that I've talked to, and I know women talk worse in the ladies' locker room. You don't hear about what's going on in there. But listen, what he said was wrong. He shouldn't have said it, but it's not the issue of this election.
I just think that you're being too dismissive of mistakes that he's made on his own behalf. So, and that to think that there won't be any legitimate reaction against that, and that it's all trumped up. Okay, no pun intended. I think that's really naive. I just don't buy that.
Well, why did CNN cut out?
They want to make money.
Comment.
I mean,
wait a minute, hang on. Let me say.
People want to make money. They want to keep people glued to the screen, basically, and they want a horse race, like you say. They always want a horse race.
They cut out Bush in that same conversation, making equally as offensive comments. They don't want to talk about Hillary's husband, who's been on the Lolita Express 45 times, going to an island that's known, for child.
But he's not on the ballot. But I know.
But it's her husband.
Yes.
All of this stuff.
It is.
What would you rather? Here's your choice of president.
All right, hold on. Wait, hold on. I don't want to get lost in the weeds. We only have 30 minutes, and I want to get a couple of things. But basically, I get what you're saying, and I've heard what you're saying, and I get that. Okay. I mean, is there anything else? I mean, that is a lot to say that the major media is rigging the election. I guess you're saying in favor of Hillary Clinton. I say they want to make money, and they want to have another war, and they want to sell drugs to us.
Sure.
And, whether it's Hillary or Trump, I'm not sure they really give a damn about it. But, okay. So, let me ask you this. I mean, so do the elections even matter? I mean, is it all just a media charade?
It is a media.
In your opinion,
it is a media charade. I believe that Trump is part of the system that, but I think possibly, and maybe this is just me hoping, that it's gotten away from them, and Trump's ego has gotten away from them, and because of the amount of popularity of what's going on with him, maybe they've lost control, and maybe they won't be able to fake it. It looks now like the FBI and the CIA are doing an internal coup so the Clintons can't steal the White House again.
So there's an internal coup to prevent the Clintons from stealing.
Well, you know
the
that
White
I think
House.
there's a law that says
within the intelligence, within the FBI and the intelligence services.
Yeah, that they came out with they reinstated the charges against Hillary. I think there's a law that says, within 60 days of an election, the law enforcement is not allowed to come out with like radioactive, info.
They have in the handbook, they have a policy of not interfering in elections. That's true. But from what I can see from what Comey has said, he's basically saying that, I promise to tell you folks, which he's never supposed to do in the first place, but now he did say this in June, that he promises to tell the Congressional Committee chairman whether there's a change in the circumstance of the case or the evidence in the case, and that they found additional evidence on Uma's, and Anthony Weiner's computer that relate to the case. So he had to tell them, we have new evidence that relates to the case. So that's all that we know so far, as I understand.
Right, and Obama is involved in those emails too. So if Hillary goes down,
well,
Obama
we don't know that
goes down.
either. We don't know that. Right. You don't know.
Well,
that.
we know that she lied. She said she doesn't know what the C stood for, but now there's thousands of emails where
I know.
she wrote the C.
We're just talking about this one instance here where the FBI has sort of said, okay, we have some more evidence, and that's it. That's all we know. They don't know who it implicates or what it says or who it's from and to. We don't know any of that. That's all we know from the FBI right now.
So I don't believe any of this. I don't believe WikiLeaks is real. I believe those emails are real, and they're releasing them on purpose. Like if WikiLeaks had, the stuff that they say they have on the Clintons, on everybody else, that embassy would have blown up 2 years ago. They would have blamed it on Assad, and that would have been the end of it.
Well, this is very interesting, David, and I wonder if you would set me straight, okay? You, David Weiss, please set me straight. Talk about WikiLeaks for a second. This is an organization. It's founded by Julian Assange to shed light on the inner workings of the state and large multinational corporations answerable to no one, basically, which I certainly applauded at the time. This is 2006, 7, whatever. And then WikiLeaks released 25 years of confidential State Department documents, and that created a monumental diplomatic crisis for Secretary of State Clinton. And that was a really fascinating thing because every country in the world was reacting to these, cables with U.S. diplomats talking about their leaders and this and that.
You realize,
and then we had the video showing U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and she at least in jest called for Assange to be executed. Now WikiLeaks has hacked emails targeting exclusively the Democrats and Hillary Clinton. Meanwhile, we know Putin dislikes Hillary Clinton, would have every reason to assist in this. Furthermore, there's nothing easier to tamper with than documents of text. So really, we should give absolutely no credibility to any of these documents.
You know what?
Am I wrong?
Well, you're half right. I believe that these are real documents, but they're being leaked out on purpose. WikiLeaks is part of this entire play that we're all witnessing. And, if you want me to speculate on why they're doing it.
Yeah, I want to speculate.
My speculation is they are trying to create chaos. They're trying to get people fighting with each other. And, there's 50-50 Democrats and Republicans.
Well, that's that is the angle that people say is the Russian angle. But the thing is, Assange, he really has a visceral hatred for Hillary Clinton because, this history. Well, he said so. And she has said that she essentially, during the whole, scandal over the cables and then the Iraq War video that was released that showed U.S. war crimes and things, Hillary, I don't remember if it was in jest or she was serious, but she was talking about executing him or something. This whole thing with Assange and the rapes and Sweden and the extradition. Yeah, so you don't buy any of that?
I don't buy any of it. We saw a video of Trump saying that Hillary's smart, nice, intelligent, and would make a great president. Well, now he's saying the opposite. People's opinions do change over time.
Well, that was before all these things happened.
Correct.
And then we had the mass surveillance
But
thing. We had Edward Snowden,
just
and we had
think
Hillary
about
also
it. If
on the other side on that, issue.
If this Julian Assange had such damning evidence about, the higher ups in our government, he would be dead years ago. There's no doubt about it. And they could blame it on someone else, and the American people would have forgotten his name already. And that would be the end of it. But they're
Is that your position on Snowden as well?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I wanted him to be real. Unfortunately, the world is a stage, big flat one, and all of this stuff is beyond what we can imagine. I'm only hoping, and I don't really believe it, that Trump is the real deal. But the truth is, what we're being shown. Have you noticed for the last 3 months, Hillary hasn't shown up anywhere except in closed
but why would
studio environment?
Why would she? Because this man is crapping doing the equivalent of crapping on himself every time he goes out in public. Why would he do anything or say anything?
He's doing rallies right now where he's getting people that...
the rallies show nothing. That only shows a small number of very active supporters. It doesn't show...
No. He's getting huge numbers of people that haven't voted in the last two elections that are going to vote this time.
He absolutely has a very strong following of people that will basically follow him anywhere and tolerate anything he says and does. That's what it seems like to me. I am looking from the outside here.
There are a small group. Probably a large group of Trump supporters that are supporting him. No matter what. But he is winning over people.
Look, David. There's plenty to be angry about. I wanted to have I wanted a candidate with Trump or Sanders or someone who's going to go there and make a mess over there because of the way things have been run for such a long time. I wanted that to happen.
Having Hillary Clinton in the White House is going to give us 8 more years of what we've had, but 10 times worse. Trump, at least he's saying he's going to go there and drain the swamp.
How is it going to be worse? I don't see how it's going to be worse.
If Hillary Clinton gets into the White House,
10 times worse.
That is going to be, they're going to take our guns. They're going to do everything. She's going to double down on Obamacare. She is a nightmare. But you guys don't know the truth about Hillary Clinton, who the Clintons are. They're the biggest drug dealers in the world. They took over Pablo Escobar's drug business. The Clintons are all over it.
I interviewed Roger Stone 4 times. Yeah. And I know everything that was in the 2 books that he published just before the elections. One about the Bush crime family, one about the Clintons. And I've heard these things before. It's not like nobody's heard these things. As a matter of fact, a lot of people know about it. A lot of this stuff is, kind of dredging up ancient history that we heard before and didn't pay attention to last time. Yeah. So this is happening again. It's coming out
for president. We have a woman whose husband is a pedophile who's involved with the biggest drug cartel in the world, who has the Clinton Foundation that has stolen billions of dollars. It hasn't delivered any of the money to where it's supposed to go, who defends rapists of young girls.
Let's be clear here, okay, man? Everyone charged with a crime deserves an attorney and they deserve good representation. Right. And I don't think anyone should be criticized for that. I really don't. I think that's completely out of bounds.
Well, this is a woman that's a hypocrite on what she's saying. Or we could have a guy that's pretty good at business, that has maybe, had some disputes on paying people and has talked like any macho guy around the guys. I don't believe he did it in front of women, and people,
You forgive him for this.
I forgive him.
I get that.
I forgive him.
You forgive
Absolutely.
him for this, and a lot of people do.
Yeah.
But, I've spoken to women who are Republicans and Democrats, and I get the same visceral reaction to this. Think what you will of it. Say it's crazy or say it's silly or say whatever. Women, they kind of, a lot of women have a visceral reaction toward it, and I think it's a problem.
William,
so, David,
I have a question I want to ask you, but you first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you aware of Hillary and her illness?
I'm forgetting what it's called.
Yeah, it's called advanced Parkinson's disease.
Oh, that. Okay, no, I hadn't heard about that.
Hillary Clinton is sick, and she is faking her appearances. The only time that we're seeing her live is when she goes out on stage, waves and leaves, and she has a doctor that won't leave, 2 feet from her, that follows her with an EpiPen or whatever kind of pen to dope her up if she has another seizure. The debates were completely faked. There might have been real conversation going on there, but what we were shown was not live. Okay. And we are being duped, in this election. Hillary Clinton will not take the White House, even if she wins.
Okay.
How about that?
So your forecast about the election is, you want to make a forecast?
Here's the forecast is, I don't know who's going to win, but neither one of them will take the White House in January. There's already enough on the table for Obama to postpone the election with this, Comey, stuff. But I really don't know what's going to happen.
I don't know why. I really don't see this latest turn of events about the emails as significant at all.
You're right.
Except for the fact of when it happened.
None of this is significant.
I don't see why it's a big
if you look at the fakery that's going on. If people go to my website.
When you're talking about the actual material we're talking about and the charge that we might be talking about, it's really only that there's a little more evidence than before that they didn't know about before, and that they have to now look at that,
William.
And that's all that they've said so far.
So I
guess it's a big thing because it's an election, and we're talking about the president of the United States.
So, William, you get led down these main narrative paths that they offer for us to keep us distracted. All of this about the emails, about WikiLeaks, about who did what, is a distraction from the fact that Hillary Clinton is sick, and we're not seeing her on television. Literally, we're going to have an artificial intelligence as a president, and we're never going to see her out in public, because she might already be dead. And if you don't believe me, go to deepinsidetherabbithole.com. On the top links, there's a holographic symbology, and there's information up there on the technology that they're using to fake us. It's real-time face morphing, and they use body doubles. I mean, if you take a look at that stuff and just Google Hillary green screen, on YouTube and watch the videos there, you will see that they're faking her appearances. And that's what all of this is about, to make people believe that she is still a candidate for the president, and she is not.
Okay. Let me ask you this, Dave. We have a couple of more minutes, and I want to kind of ask you kind of global question. So the Trump campaign has relied a lot on what many people consider to be alternative media sources. And I'm just thinking, it seems to me that a more conspiratorial or a more conspiracy-based way of thinking is coming of age now, in some sense, because of this. And I wonder what you think about it. What do you think about that?
Well, the previous elections, I've never seen a rally except what CNN may have shown for a few minutes here and there in previous elections. But now with social media, Trump does a rally. It's streamed on 100 YouTube channels, and it's on Facebook live streaming. You could watch it while walking down the street, at work, at home, in the bathroom. It doesn't matter. People can watch it anywhere. They can watch it on their Apple Watch. So he's getting his message out there, and he's bypassing the mainstream media. That's the only reason I have a glimmer of hope that he's gone a little rogue and perhaps thinks he can make a change before something tragic happens to stop him, because people in power don't give up their power.
Right. That much I think we could all agree on. That's for sure. Power does not concede without a fight, as they say.
But you will not see Hillary in public walking down the street. You won't see her going into a Starbucks. You won't see her anywhere, because she's not able to walk if she's still alive.
So, David, because I know that you don't know Hillary Clinton, and I don't know Hillary Clinton, and I've never met her, and you have never met her, how sure are you about what you're saying?
You know what? That's
saying?
A good answer. That's a good question. The thing is, never in the history of a presidential race has a president disappeared like this. And every time we see her, it's in an enclosed studio environment, and there's lots of anomalies. I mean, she was caught cheating at the last debate, without a doubt, with the teleprompter in her podium. She was caught with an earpiece in the debate before that. And I don't believe it was even her. That's why they had the earpiece and the teleprompter. how sure am I? The fact that in the last 3 elections, I mean, not last 3 elections, in history of elections.
Just like, for example, like you're saying Hillary Clinton is either deathly ill or she's already dead.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
How sure are you about that?
Well, I've been trying to prove myself wrong for months now, and she has not shown up anywhere. Never has this happened.
All right, look, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is absolutely sure. What do you think?
I think I'm at a 9.9.
9.9.
Yeah. 9.9, because you know what? It might be something else. But Hillary Clinton is not the person we're seeing doing the debates. And if you know anything about real-time face morphing, it's on my website, the holographic symbology page. Take your time, go through there. Watch Obama's speech he did from the White House on ISIS. Totally fake. He wasn't even there. And there's glitches in it. Did you see Hillary glitch out at one of her campaign rallies? She was totally green screen, and her body vanished. It pixelated and vanished, and the podium disappeared, and the backdrop behind her was in full view. Don't even listen to the content. Look at what you're looking at. People are being fooled.
I always, this is one thing that I always find, I have a problem with this, drawing any conclusions from video that you see and saying, this is what that shows and that's what this shows.
Yeah, but there's no other way to explain it. There's no other possible explanation other than she's in front of a green screen at a rally, okay? So that means it's been faked. The media's in on it. Hillary's in on it. End of story. There's no other explanation.
Well, you are not in on it, David, and I am not in on it. That is for absolutely sure. And I really do appreciate you coming on the show, David. Is there anything else you're doing or anything else you want people to be aware of?
Check out everything that I'm doing is on deepinsidetherabbithole.com, and my YouTube channel is the initials of that, DITRH. And you'll learn some stuff if you have the courage to look.
David, thank you for being with us, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, William, see ya.
And there you have it, the 1 in a million David Weiss. And we'll be checking back with him next week, along with our other guests, to see what they have to say about the aftermath of the elections. I want to thank you for being with us today, and I want to encourage everybody to get out and vote, and may the best man or woman win. This is William Kern, the managing editor and founder of WorldMeets.us, and the host of this program, the World Meets America Report, signing off until next time.